Today, we're digging deep, and I mean quite literally, into the hidden life of forests. But what if I told you that a forest isn't just a bunch of individual trees standing next to each other? What if it's actually a single interconnected superorganism? Well, that's the revolutionary idea we're going to explore.
This incredible idea was really brought into the spotlight by an ecologist named Dr. Suzanne Simard. Her research, going back more than 2 decades, suggested that right below our feet, there's this bustling secret world, a subterranean network that connects pretty much everything in the forest. But a discovery like that brings up a pretty big question.
So, is it true? Can trees actually communicate? Do they cooperate? And how in the world would an underground conversation like that even work? All right, let's get to the root of it.
To really get to the bottom of this, we first have to understand that nature is just full of these surprising connections. And believe it or not, our story about trees, well, it actually begins with fish.
That's right, salmon. You see, every year, these salmon make an epic journey from the ocean all the way back to the streams where they were born to spawn and then die. And as they decompose, they release this massive amount of nutrients they collected from the ocean, into these forest ecosystems, which are often surprisingly nutrient poor.
So how much of a difference does this really make? Well, scientists did some analysis, and what they found was just astonishing. Get this, trees that were growing near these spawning streams got between 22 and 24% of their nitrogen directly from the ocean. It was delivered by the salmon. It's this huge nutrient subsidy, carried hundreds of miles inland.
And the impact on the forest? It's stunning. I mean, look at this. Sitka spruce trees near the spawning streams had growth rates more than 3 times higher than the trees farther away. The salmon were literally fertilizing the forest from the inside out. So, the salmon basically proved that forests have these hidden pipelines for resources. They were like an external delivery service. But that just begs the question, right? What if there's an internal distribution network already built into the forest floor?
And that brings us to these guys, mycorrhizal networks. Now, these are these vast, ancient webs of fungi living in the soil. They form a symbiotic, a mutually beneficial relationship with plant roots. The fungi are absolute masters at pulling hard-to-get nutrients like nitrogen and phosphorus out of the soil, and then they trade them with the trees for the sugars that the trees make through photosynthesis. It's a classic win-win situation.
This underground network is so vast and so complex, connecting tree after tree, that it's earned a really fitting nickname, the Wood Wide Web. And just like our internet, it seems to be a system for communication and sharing resources.
Now, within this incredible network, researchers started to identify certain nodes that were way more important than others. They gave them a name, mother trees.
Okay, take a look at this, because what's so cool here is that this isn't some artist's drawing. This is a real map of the network. Using DNA analysis, researchers were actually able to trace the fungal connections between individual trees. And they found that the biggest, oldest trees, those are the largest dark circles you see here, were the most connected hubs. One mother tree, the one with the arrow, was linked to 47 other trees, and that's just in this one small plot.
So the popular understanding became that these mother trees are like the nurturing hearts of the forest. The theory is that they use this network to feed seedlings extra nutrients to help them grow, to send out chemical warning signals about insect attacks to their neighbors, to shuttle resources to trees that are sick or struggling, and even to recognize and give preferential treatment to their own offspring. It's this beautiful, cooperative vision of a forest.
But, science is a process, and even the most inspiring and beautiful ideas have to be tested and tested rigorously. And that's exactly what happened next, which led to a really fascinating scientific debate.
So this idea of nurturing mother trees in a cooperative wood wide web really captured the public's imagination. But other scientists started to ask some tough questions, like how solid is the actual field evidence for these very specific, very complex behaviors?
So let's look at one of the biggest claims, that mother trees play favorites with their own kin. On the left, you've got the popular idea. On the right, what the scientific scrutiny found. A major review paper from 2023 concluded that this claim, as compelling as it is not yet supported by a single published field study. Okay, what about the idea that hooking into the network gives young trees a big leg up? Well, again, when scientists really dug into the data from the field, the picture got a lot more complicated. They looked at a whole bunch of studies and found that, the effect of being connected could be positive, but it could also be negative or have no effect at all. In fact, it turned out that neutral results were actually the most common outcome.
This quote from Dr. Karst really sums up where the debate is right now. The existence of the fungal networks themselves, that's not really in question, but the story about what those networks do, the very specific, purposeful, cooperative behaviors, that story has moved a lot faster than the scientific evidence from the field can actually support.
So, you might be wondering, why does all this scientific back and forth really matter? Well, it matters a lot, because these ideas are already having a huge impact on how we think about, and more importantly, how we manage our planet's forests, especially now, in the face of climate change.
For a long time, a lot of logging involved clear-cutting, which, as you can imagine, just obliterates these underground networks. The Wood Wide Web idea helped inspire a shift to what's called retention forestry. That's where loggers intentionally leave the big, old mother tree standing, hoping they'll act as life support systems for the new generation of trees. The ultimate goal now is to get to what people are calling climate-smart forestry, finding a way to manage our forests for long-term health and resilience.
And that is incredibly complex, because we ask a lot from our forests today. We need them for wood products, for sure, but we also need them to preserve biodiversity, to act as these massive carbon sinks to help fight climate change, and to be resilient enough to survive threats like drought and fire. Balancing all of those competing demands, that is the central challenge.
So the big takeaway here isn't that the whole idea of cooperation is wrong. It's that the relationships in a forest are just incredibly, unbelievably complex. Yeah, there might be cooperation, but there's also competition, and the fungi themselves have their own evolutionary goals. The main discovery here is the existence of this whole hidden layer of complexity itself.
And that leaves us with a final, really critical question. We've peeled back the forest floor and we've discovered a world that is far more intricate and interconnected than we ever knew. The debate over the tiny details, that's going to continue. But the fundamental discovery of this hidden network, that's here to stay. So the question for us now is, are we wise enough to actually act on that knowledge?